In today's video, we're going to be taking a look here at the full European model run and the full GFS model run, where we have our Northeast snowstorm and then back-to-back Upper Midwest and Great Lakes snowstorms that we need to go over in today's video. Now, a lot of these storms don't just include snowfall. I know that most of you are only interested in the snow, but there is some severe weather to go around because especially, we're going to name them storm number 1, 2, and 3, but storm number 2 poses a pretty big severe weather risk, and we're going to be going over that today. Flooding is of a pretty big concern, so we're going to go over precipitation. This is going to be a full-blown direct weather video, which we haven't had in a few days here. We're also going to be going over the European and that GFS model, like I mentioned. I've just been a little bit under the weather and trying to just kind of figure things out the last few days in the new year. I've had a little bit of a fever. It's been kind of strange, a little bit unsymptomatic, I would say. It's just been a slight fever and achiness. It's been a strange illness. But I do take plenty of vitamins. This is totally besides the point, but I take plenty of vitamins. So a lot of times when I get sick, it's very, very mild. But I will kind of get it to an extent, and that's pretty much what happened. So I've been tired, uploading pretty late, but today it's coming out late, but we're getting a very, very full video here today, which I'm excited about. So let's go over things here. And we can see storm number 1 developing here for the Smoky Mountains and really just the lower Appalachian Mountains in general. And I want to point something out. We do have this cold front right here. And that is really presenting itself clearly, as you can see with that precipitation field. And we have somewhat of a warm front out there ahead of it. So we have warm air kind of infiltrating this kind of southeast corner of the storm. And then we have the cold air kind of trying to move in behind everything. So this factor right here is going to cause snowfall on the western end to dip a lot further south. On the eastern end, it's going to be a lot harder to come by snowfalls. So keep that in mind as we track where that low is located. Equally, I'm going to keep that on screen because it looks pretty nice, but we can see another low developing over southwestern Canada, and this is bringing quite a bit of heavy snowfall here to your Cascade Mountains, as you can see. That's going to be pretty moderate to heavy rainfall for the coastal and lower elevation areas, but for those mountainous regions in the Cascades, we do have very heavy snowfall occurring. In between all of this, we see cool air pouring into the central and western states, eventually moving further and further eastward over time. So that's by tomorrow afternoon. As we just creep this a little bit further, we can see that this low is now located near the Delmarva. So we see snowfall kind of pushing further south on the western end, harder to come by here on the eastern end as we have that warm air flowing northward. And meanwhile, we have this kind of storm out in the northwest corner of the nation here, spreading and impacting more areas. Definitely a very, very impactful situation out west and for the northeast, of course. Now we're going to zoom into the east just for a frame. I know a lot of you in the central states and the western states were pretty frustrated yesterday. I wanted to concentrate just on that single storm because I knew it was going to be such a late and shorter video that I just wanted to focus in on the imminent. Today is a full picture kind of view, so we're not going to focus too much only on the northeast. I just want to zoom in so we can see the mixing going on, and then we're going to zoom back out before we even move anything. Well, we might move it a little bit, but we'll move it back. How about that? We do see that there is rainfall mixing in now, according to this model, for portions of New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island here, and then southeastern Massachusetts. This is exactly what I've been talking about for 2 or 3 days here. Now we're seeing it kind of on this simulated radar screen of our European model. Heaviest pure snowfall staying for New York, southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire, northern Massachusetts, and then portions of Maine. This has kind of been my expectation for, I would say, 24 or 48 hours. I'm not going to pretend like I've been thinking this for 5 or 6 days here, which has absolutely not been the case. We've seen unforeseen shifts in the models, which make it hard to pin down exact details in the long range, and this is exactly why I say take things with a grain of salt. We know more now, and we're going over that today. I will always just unfold information as we get it. That's the best I can really offer to you. I try to make predictions outside of what the models are showing, but beyond that, we can only really go based off of the information that we have available to us. I think most people understand that. So we're going to remember 12Z Sunday is what we have to get back to when we take a look at the national view. But as time goes on, again, on the western end of this low, cold air is able to pour in. So we see 986. It's actually intensifying. But not only that, we have that cold front underneath here, and this allows for cold air to pour southward behind that. And that's why we see a lot of these areas that were raining seeing more snowfall later on. So New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, that rain snow line is pouring southward, and we're pretty much done with the mixing. Might see some tail end snowfall because of that. It's all about those frontal boundaries, the cold fronts and the warm fronts, and proximity to this low pressure system. Around the low, there's a lot of warm air in the middle, lower, and upper layers. It kind of varies, especially the closer you get to the low, the actual ground temperatures up is warmer. But if you're not super close to the low, but sort of close, you see sometimes those middle layers between those clouds and between the ground warm up a little bit, and that's what causes sleet. It's starting as snow in the clouds. It lowers into that warm layer that we just talked about. It melts into rain, but there's colder air near the ground as well, and it refreezes as that ice pellet, or sleet as we call it. So that is the formation of sleet, kind of in a nutshell there, and that's oftentimes what we see mix in these situations. If it worsens and it becomes even closer here this low, you can see it switch over to actually pure rain from even sleet. So both are pretty much going to hold back snowfall totals, so don't really worry too much about that. Shouldn't really change things too much as far as accumulation. Both rain and snowfall, or better yet, both rain and sleet fall at a 1-to-1 ratio, approximately. Sleet might come in at like a 2-to-1 ratio. I don't really know, but it's such a low ratio that the liquid precipitation is about the amount that it accumulates. So if you see 1 inch of precipitation in the form of sleet, you get 1 inch of accumulation. Whereas snowfall is usually at the lowest about 5, 6, or 7-to-1 ratio, meaning for every 1 inch of precipitation, you're seeing 5 inches of accumulated snowfall. We all know snow has air in it. It's airy, it's fluffy. That is what causes it to accumulate so much greater than the actual liquid precipitation hitting the ground. So that is the story here. We see on the tail end here, this is going to be by about 8 p.m. on Sunday the 7th. Keep in mind the Patriots play at home versus the Jets here in Foxborough, Massachusetts. Should be one of the heaviest snow games that we have seen in a long, long time. Should see very heavy accumulating snowfall and strong winds during the storm. Could even be near blizzard conditions. So definitely, if you're curious about watching the snow live on TV, that could be a pretty cool way to do it, is tuning into that game. Definitely, I'm a Patriots fan, but definitely going to be a pretty bad game. Hoping, honest to God, I hope the Patriots lose at this point, because we're not making the playoffs, of course. It's the last week of the season. Might as well keep that good draft pick. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that thought process. Am I a terrible fan? I don't know. We move on, and we see that eventually moves out. So we will take a look at the total snowfall here. I promise you we're going to move back to that national view. When we look at this Kuchera ratio, it looks pretty elevated, these amounts of snowfall, but really what I want to look at here is the positive snow depth change. This takes into account accumulation, ground temperatures, rain mixing in, all sorts of things. And we get much more conservative numbers here. I think this might be a little too conservative, but it's probably actually going to be closer than those higher totals. So we see here that minimal accumulation occurs really close to the coast here of New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. We saw the green showing up. We saw the rain mixing in, maybe even sleet. That's best case for cold and snow lovers. Certainly going to hold back accumulations greatly, and we're seeing a dusting to maybe an inch or two, if anything. It could be so challenging to accumulate near this coast that we don't see any accumulation. Keep that in mind. We see the bullseye set up somewhere between the Catskills, a little bit in the Adirondacks here, the Green Mountains and Berkshires, and then kind of these hilly regions in between Massachusetts and New Hampshire, which tends to be a really good spot to be during these types of snowfall events. And the bullseye looks to be about 6 to 10 inches. I think that's mostly what we're looking at in here. I think this location is pretty accurate, if you ask me. This is my current thinking. And I think that there could be some 10-inch plus amounts isolated in there. This is a pretty low resolution model compared to what actually happens in real life. So I think there's some opportunity for higher amounts within there. Certainly 10 to 12 can't be ruled out in some bullseye locations. Very, very specific bullseye locations. Extremely isolated, maybe even pushing 15. And that's if we see heavier banding than expected. I think more like 10, 11, 12 inches in that bullseye for very isolated spots is the most realistic solution. With a pretty wide bullseye area, again, in this pocket here, expecting around 6, 7, 8 inches, I would say, is probably going to be the more widespread number we see there. Very widespread 2 to 6 inch amounts though throughout all of these blues, so certainly a widespread accumulating plowable snowfall event. These are the areas getting into those higher totals where we're looking at more significant accumulation in the purples. Now, let's go back to 48 hours. I did promise you guys we're going to do this. So, backtracking a lot here. Let's go back to the national view. Let's go back to our precipitation type. Okay, we're back. Let's go ahead and take a look at the entirety of our pattern here. Right after that storm moves out, we actually begin to see a warming pattern here in the east. Warmer air moves back in briefly. We get a strengthening storm over Texas and Oklahoma here. Probably has a bit of a warm front here. Cold front underneath. So we're seeing this warm front help to kind of rise those warm temperatures up throughout the eastern areas, especially to the east of that low. Again, rain snow line is somewhere in northern Kansas up here, but we see rain snow line to the west of the low down in Mexico. So definitely a significant difference if you're west or east of that low, as you can see. We're talking hundreds of miles difference here. We're already seeing snowfall here for the four corner states, the plains as a result of this, and we get another northwest system moving in, which we'll continue to track here. But as we keep going, what we see happening is this is developed down to a 995 over Oklahoma. Snowfall to the north and west of that low, intensifying to moderate to heavy snowfall. And then we have a 994 coming on shore of Washington State, bringing heavy snowfall to Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. Certainly heavy system after heavy system moving into the states at this point. Regardless of who sees the snow, we're definitely looking at major systems and major snowstorms moving in with cold in spots. And that's certainly more than we could say for December. We're going to zoom into the Midwest and Ohio Valley for those snowfall totals in a moment. Keep that in mind. But we see this low begins to rise up. So it was in Oklahoma. It does this kind of curve to the north now over Illinois, kind of southern Illinois here. Heavy snowfall for Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin by this point. Some front-end snowfall for the Northeast here, as you can see. But again, let me draw out the dynamic for you. Your low is here. Sorry if this bores you guys. I think it's hugely important, though. Cold front down below, maybe even extending further south than that. Let me start over. Man, I'm a mess today. 984 millibar low pressure center there. Cold front extends a lot further south than that, it appears. Something like this is a lot of what you're looking at. And then this warm front extends out of the low and is extending towards the east here. That is your setup here at this point. So we have this warmer air surging northward, and it's going to continue making ground northward. And then the cold air is pouring in behind this system, even causing snow for, again, Oklahoma and Arkansas to the west of that low. So we're seeing massive differences because of these frontal boundaries. So this rain snow line, because of that warm front, is going to continue to actually move northward. And instead of getting snowier, you're actually going to start out as snow perhaps, and then switch over to rainfall because you're to the east of that low pressure system. You're where the warm front is located at this point. As we look back towards the northwest, we see a 986 millibar low pressure center over northern Montana, creating a very major snowstorm throughout the Cascades and the northern Rockies there. Certainly a very intense system. And as we keep making progress here, we see our upper Midwest system shifts eastward. A lot of this energy is transferring further and further eastward, but it's very intense. A 974 millibar low pressure center. And we're seeing very heavy snowfall here still for the Midwest and into the Great Lakes here. So we're going to take a look at those accumulations in a moment. Perhaps the southern Appalachian Mountains getting in on some last-minute snowfall as a result of this. Again, we see New England and the Adirondacks seeing some snowfall, but that warm front continues to make ground northward. So that is going to hinder things. And look, we see even New Hampshire and Maine eventually switching to all rainfall, so that accumulation will likely melt as a result of that. Your low is now over Canada as a 979, very intense system, and perhaps some back-end lake effect snow or snow showers happening over Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. Meanwhile, our low out west has now taken a deep dive southward towards the Sierra Nevadas as a 997 millibar low pressure center. Plentiful snowfall happening across the west coast. Not along the west coast, but inland from that west coast, of course. Let's go ahead and take a look here at the Ohio Valley as a whole. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at the snowfall as a result of this system. Again, taking a look at the positive snow depth change. What we see is that there is a lot going on here. Grays are adjusting, if anything. Blues are 2 to 6 inches. Purples are 6 to 10. And pinks are pushing on 10 to 20. Probably more like 10 to 12, 10 to 15 in this case. And we could see a bullseye setting up somewhere in this pocket here, according to this European model. Something like this, from eastern Kansas into northern Missouri, northern Illinois, extremely far northwestern Indiana, and into northern Michigan there. That is where we're expecting 6 to 10 inches of snowfall overall. Outside of here, you're expecting less as of now. Keep in mind, this system's a little bit further out, and kind of due in part to that, we expect changes, just like we saw with our most recent Northeast system. We do expect shifts to perhaps happen with this Midwest system, so don't take this as gospel. Don't take this as something that's a sure thing, that it's for sure going to be inside this black blob. That is the information we have presented to us now. Meteorology is a incomplete science, and we do expect changes, unforeseen changes, over the next 24, 36, 48, and maybe even the next 3 or 4 days as we lead up to this system. We will update you guys on that daily, rest assured, but certainly something to pay attention to, certainly something that could change. That's the current guidance that we have available to us now, though. Let's keep going, and we see another kind of minor clipper system. It's actually a stronger low, but has less moisture available to it. So it is a 998 millibar low pressure center, which is pretty standard for a strong storm. But we're seeing like light to moderate snowfall pretty widespread throughout that area. More so what you'd expect to see with a much weaker low. But that's what we're left with because it doesn't tap into this Gulf moisture at all. This moisture is getting caught in this jet stream moving offshore, and this low is riding along that northern jet, which is separated at this point. So we're not seeing much in the way of Gulf moisture in that system. Our attention still lies on this western system that we've been watching develop. It's now a 999 over Arizona. We oftentimes see these kind of weaken as they move over the Rockies later to intensify. And sure enough, we see it kind of land kind of in the Dallas-Fort Worth area here as a 992. We have snowfall to the north of this low for Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. Certainly a very intense system. Perhaps even another system moving in here to the northwest. So no lack of storms here, as you can see, over the next 10 to 15 days. Certainly not the case. This storm, as opposed to that previous one, is really incurring a lot of Gulf moisture. So this one's going to have a lot more to work with. Certainly something we'll watch for. Look at how rich that moisture is in that system. It's down to a 985 millibar low pressure center. Again, we'll draw out the frontal boundaries for you guys here so you understand what's going on. Cold front underneath, warm front here to the east. So what we expect is warm air surging northward to the east of that low, cold air diving southward here to the west of that low, something like this. And that is why that rain snow line is diving southward on the western end of things, and it's pushing northward on the eastern end of things. That's that rain snow line approximately. Keep that in mind as we move forward, but we see, and take this with a grain of salt, this is also very far out. I hate to mention that, but that is also the case. Eastern Oklahoma, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, southeastern Kansas, southern Illinois, southern Indiana here dealing with moderate to very heavy snowfall. This one could, if it looked this way, be the more intense one of all three. And we see this eventually move up into the mid-Atlantic. It's kind of a hybrid of the two storms that we saw before it. So it's a hybrid of storm 1 and 2. That's how I kind of look at this one. Cold front underneath here, warm front to the east. So we do see warm air pushing northward, but there is cold air diving southward to the west, and that's certainly going to play a role as well. While we're talking about all of this, keep in mind we have that system number 4 out west, heavy snowfall for the Rockies, Cascades, and Sierra Nevadas, likely going to move eastward from that point and cause impacts. But right now that low is located over the mid-Atlantic. Let's see what it ends up doing. And the difference here between this one and our one happening very soon is that our one happening very soon sort of moved out and slid offshore of the coast, and that's what allowed for all of these New England areas for the most part to stay all snowfall. This system, however, which I'll draw in the yellow, what it does is it just continues to kind of ride straight up the coastline. So if you think this current storm is causing coastal mixing issues, wait until you see one like this, because we would see mixing perhaps as far northward as southern New Hampshire, southern Maine, southern Vermont, southern New York. We're talking, if I zoom in here for just a moment, we're talking mixing happening well north of the one that we're currently seeing. We're talking like an area like this with severe mixing. It's a very strong low, 977 there, but it's on the coastline, as you can see. So we're seeing those same sleet and rain issues very close to the coast and far onshore, as opposed to that previous system. Now, as we move back to the national view, which we're going to keep going with, we see that one innocently moves off the coast. Not really innocently, it actually does bring a lot of impacts, I should say. We see that there is this fourth system that kind of stalls out. Don't really know what would come of this. It's kind of a tough pattern to predict. My expectation would be that it would do something along these lines and follow the jet stream. But of course, these jet streams can kind of change. It could take more of that northern route and impact more of the upper Midwest. There's a lot at play here. Could take a more southern route and come up the coast. Anything goes when you're this far out and when you're not really seeing any guidance for that storm. Keep that in mind. We'll go over the total snowfall for the entire model run in a moment, but let's look at the GFS. Same exact look here for storm number 1. It has it very close to the coast. Coastal mixing for sure. Heaviest snowfall is in a pretty similar spot, so we're not going to focus too much on that. I want to move right into storm number 2. Here's that severe weather, by the way, that we expect. It's going to be somewhere in this proximity here. Definitely could be looking at some impactful severe weather. As far as, marginal slight risk, maybe enhanced risk, that's the range we're talking here likely. Maybe more. Definitely need to be watching it. We see that front end snowfall for the Northeast again, but that rain snow line is chasing it up the coast, so expect rainfall afterwards. Bullseye is set up over a pretty similar spot. We'll look at that in a moment. So not much to mention there. I want to get to the long range with this GFS model because there is not any major differences with those first 2 storms. Storm number 3, we get a pretty similar solution. It's a much stronger storm like we saw. The only difference is the European model takes it and moves it off the East Coast here, whereas the GFS model wants to take it more on that Storm 2 track and move it straight up into Canada, it appears. As you can see. So that's a pretty different look for sure. We do get some wintry activity there in the Northeast if you take a look, but it's severe mixing with ice, sleet, rain, snow. Everything goes according to this model on this storm. We do get storm number 4 here as well. As you can see, we can see it here in the Southwest, and we're pretty primed with some Arctic air, especially out west, but also over the eastern states. We kind of have like a coast-to-coast trough here, which I'm personally taking with a grain of salt because this seems to be a pretty rare pattern to see cold air from coast to coast. Much more common to see warmth from coast to coast. We are seeing Arctic air from the northeast to the northwest here. Definitely something that's possible, but not super common. So we'll continue to track that with you guys. But storm number 4 here comes in, and we see it kind of move through the upper Midwest and northeast again with that low tracking straight up the coast. Definitely an interesting storm to say the least. This follows with really, really cold air behind it. This would be the severest cold of the season by far. And we actually get another northwest system there, and look at it chase the jet stream. And this becomes more of a southern slider nor'easter type storm. So these models are indicating these types of storms could be possible later on in the model run, impacting more of the southeast and mid-Atlantic. Something to watch, but something to also take with a grain of salt, as this is very far out. That could be an interesting situation though. And I think the most interesting thing of all is, even as we reach the end of the model run here, we have this really solid Arctic air pattern for the east. Again, we talked about weeks ago how there's not Arctic air and ice and snow available to us, but after this whole 10 to 15 day period is up, we will have plenty of ice and snow, so things will have turned around. And we have Arctic air moving in. We actually have warm air surging for the west, which has been a while since we had that positive PNA pattern. And this would be perfect moving into late January, I must say. This is a beautiful look for cold and snow lovers in the east. Total precipitation, a lot for the northwest, as every single storm pretty much originates from this area and moves southward. So that is why we see a tremendous amount of precipitation there. And then for the east and upper Midwest, anywhere east of this left line on this bubble here is seeing above average precipitation, especially along the coast where we're seeing 2, 3, 4, maybe even more inches of rainfall. Certainly a very impactful amount of rainfall over the next 10 days. The European model's total model run snowfall is tremendous out west, where we're seeing feet of snowfall, possibly hundreds of inches for those mountaintops. This is going to be amazing for the ski resorts out west. For the central plains, especially the northern plains, but even the middle plains here, as you can see, into the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, we're also seeing a pretty tremendous amount of snowfall for them, 10 inches plus for most folks there, according to this model. And then for the northeast, as we get multiple snowstorms, this model indicates that it is likely we will see over 2 feet of snowfall for the mountainous regions of the northwest, or the northeast. We're talking Adirondacks, Catskills, Green Mountains, White Mountains, northern Maine there. And then possibly 10 inches plus for most everybody in the northeast. Something to take with a grain of salt, also something to watch, as activity does seem to be on the rise for sure. And this seems a lot more plausible me telling you this on January 5th as we're right on the doorstep of a major snowstorm than it did in mid-December when this was all speculation. Of course, this all came to be, but definitely was a lot less believable than that it is now. So things are changing, definitely. Total snowfall here on the GFS. Similarly, we're seeing 10 inches plus for all of the Northeast there. A lot more for the upper Midwest and Great Lakes actually here, as we're seeing feet of snowfall perhaps, especially in these kind of grayish looking areas. And then similarly for the West, we're seeing large amounts of snowfall. So great agreement here. I just want to go over that severe weather. We're not taking a look yet at the upcoming far end severe weather. Actually, we can take a look at that in a moment, but we see that we have a marginal risk here for southern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida down the west coast a little bit. A marginal risk level 1 of severe weather. We'll be watching for potential severe thunderstorms there. For day 2 here, which is actually going to be tomorrow, so Saturday morning through Sunday morning, we have a marginal risk for central Florida there, and then a general thunderstorm risk extending all the way up into the mid-Atlantic, just to the south of where we're seeing snowfall. So this is going to be bringing thunderstorms with it. We should be able to see this extended outlook here, and this is where we likely will have a slight severe weather risk for the Gulf Coast of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida there. And the day after it, the Southeast appears to have a pretty big severe weather risk. Florida, portions of Alabama up through Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina there. Definitely going to be watching that. And then we basically move beyond these severe weather events after that point. So a few days of severe weather here, wintertime severe weather, which isn't unheard of, but obviously comes as a little bit of a shock to some people upcoming as well. Well, anyway, guys, I haven't looked at how long I've been recording. I feel like it has been a tremendous amount of time, potentially direct weather record breaking outside of live streams. So thank you for being here for this potentially historic direct weather video here. I appreciate all of you. I like making this in-depth video, and I look forward to making more of them for you guys daily as we track this very active winter pattern. I couldn't be more excited. I love the weather. I love tracking it, and I love having things to talk about. So I look forward to talking with you guys more. Be sure to subscribe for these daily weather uploads. Be sure to also hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload. Like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.